Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 394. Back at it after another vacation.
On the job, making the tough decisions. 24/7. That's 24 hours a week. 7 months a year.
This is month number 5. So I have 7 straight weeks, almost 8 full weeks now. I'm going to have to work until my wife and I head to Door County at the end of October. But back after a long road trip and 3 national parks, we got to put 3 pins in the pin board. My wife has a water bottle that's got stickers that you can put on whenever you visit one. She put those on last night. So we will give you a little bit of a road trip and national park trip review here at the beginning part of the podcast. And then we'll hop into it. You know, when we were gone, the Brewers made some history. They scored 22 runs in a game. It was like a football final score. They won a series in LA. We listened to a lot of those games on Sirius XM. I hate, as a terrestrial radio employee, I hate to have to shout out Sirius XM, but it is better in every fathomable way. But because of that, we were able to listen to the Brewer radio broadcast of all those games. So they win a series in LA, win the season series there. Win a series against the Mariners, put 22 on the board in the first game of that series, and then they win a series against Atlanta, right now the number 3 team in the National League, with last night's Little League World Series Classic capping things. Brewers lost that game. We'll talk about that, of course, but we'll talk about the weekend against Atlanta. Jacob Mizorowski versus Chris Sale on Friday. That kind of lived up to the billing. We'll go over all of that. I also had a chance in Louisville on Friday night to watch on NFL Network at the hotel we were staying at the Packer-Bronco preseason game. You can imagine my wife's excitement. Somebody who doesn't love football on vacation. Hey, great news. We can watch a preseason football game during vacation. Oh, great. The Packers win that game 33-13. Trey Smack, I have to admit, momentum is building. I'm getting excited about the rookie kicker after what had been an uneven training camp leading into preseason game number 1. He is perfect, and the number 1 offense played 1 drive. They look good in that 20-point win on Friday. We'll talk about that. I have just a little bit of a Giannis thing I want to talk about at the end of the podcast as well. Giannis is already frustrating Miami Heat fans. I had to laugh at that on Sunday, because he cannot stop bringing up how much he wants to come back to Milwaukee at the end of his career. And he's brought this up so much that a lot of the Heat podcasts and the Heat blogs on Twitter last night were saying, can you shut up about Milwaukee? You haven't even played a game in Miami yet, and you want to go back to Milwaukee. So we're going to touch on that a little bit at the end of the podcast as well. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. In time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's complete intercepted. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, backed away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul on a pinnacle ball, throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucs are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in on your Monday morning, getting back after it after a week off and a lot of driving. Like, rate, and subscribe if you can. Give us a rating, please. We always ask you to give us ratings. So on Spotify, on Apple, on Amazon Music, on iHeart, however you are consuming this here podcast, we would appreciate a rating, a review, a share, a subscription, whatever you can do there. And then don't forget, too, the email is strangebrewpod@aol.com. I think we're going to do one. I know we kind of touched on this on the podcast schedule going forward. We are going to start our 5 bold predictions, which were 0 for last year, right? We're going to start our 5 bold predictions this Friday. We'll do one episode leading into the regular season opener, Packers in Minnesota on September 13th. I have a 3-year-old birthday party to go to on that day at 2 o'clock. So we'll have to find a way to work in that game, too, at 3:25 on that Sunday. But the podcast, then the 11th, leading into that opening weekend, we will have kind of our last bold prediction. We'll have a lot of the futures stuff that we do, futures bets on passing yards, on MVP, Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, which have carried us, by the way. You know, we give the game-by-game predictions every Friday heading into an NFL weekend, and we've been pretty good with those, hovering around 500 or a little better than 500. Year one of the podcast, we were great on those and the futures, but the future bets have really weighed it in our favor, where in year one of the podcast, it was Jaden Daniels Rookie of the Year was 9-1, so that's a +9 play. And then we had the Josh Allen MVP at 8-1, and then we had Vrabel 7-1 Coach of the Year last year. So those have helped at the end of the year to get us either just above 500 or well above 500 in each of the first 3 years of the podcast. So that Friday we'll be doing that, and I think we're going to kind of turn that one into a mailbag episode then on Friday, September 11th. So any questions, takes, comments on the Packers, Badgers, whatever, let me know. strangebrewpod@AOL.com. strangebrewpod@AOL.com. So we're going to start with, now let's see if I can predict how long we're going to talk about the vacation. Because nothing anybody loves more than when somebody's gone on vacation and they can't stop talking to you about the vacation. It's like hearing about somebody's fantasy baseball team. I don't know how much people get into it. Some people like the vacation review, some people don't. So my guess would be we are going to talk here for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes about the vacation. So if you fast forward to about 30 minutes into it, we'll get into Brewer conversation, Packer preseason game in Denver conversation, and a little bit of Giannis conversation in there as well. But we are going to start with the trip, so we have to dust off the travel pod intro.
Well, she sneaks around the world from Kiev to Carolina. She's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize. She'll take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me, where in the world is
John? We are just stupid as hell. I mean, what is that? So I know the last episode, or the last time we did this, I think we did a standalone travel episode. My wife joined us on the spring training one. I was going to try to make that happen again, but it just became too tight scheduling-wise. Everybody's going back to work today, and then she's got a curling tournament, very early season curling tournament that's coming up this weekend. So she's got a short week again. She's got a 3-day week again. And then she's off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday this weekend. So it just didn't quite work out to get her on this one. Although maybe at some point we can have her on in the next few weeks and just give her take on the trip and what differs from my take on the trip. But we, I think, did a standalone coming out of the Christmas pod. Or going into the Christmas in New York pod. That was a standalone. Was the spring training one a standalone too? I don't know. But we did, for our big vacation this year, we have a lot of small vacations, and then we had one big vacation. We did a good old-fashioned road trip, the likes of which we have not done. I think I mentioned this since probably our friends got married in Myrtle Beach, and we were around the same area. We were in that South Carolina area, and the drive back was, again, about 15 hours. So it had been a little bit since we'd committed to the drive and not flying somewhere, but we knocked out 3 national parks, and we drove all the way there and all the way home.
106 miles to Chicago.
South Carolina.
Got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Yeah, it had been a long time since I'd done a trip like that. Now, the drive out there, here, just in no particular order, I've got just some road trip stuff, and then we'll get into the national park breakdown. So the drive out there was actually not too bad. We went 4.5, 5 hours on night one. We left Friday after my wife got home from work, so we drove just south of Indianapolis. By the way, Indiana, I don't know. I don't think there's any polite way to put this. You know we like to keep this as PG as we can here, unless I slip up once in a while. The state of Indiana is just an utter shithole. Like, I have no other polite way to put it. I'm sure there are plenty of really good people. Do we have downloads in Indiana? Hold on. Let me just check to see if we can get a schematic breakdown here. If we have anybody that is listening in Indiana. I don't think we have any downloads in Indiana that we're going to offend. And that may not even offend them. They may just take that in stride. They may just say, yeah, you're right. I'm sure there are plenty of great people that have emerged from Indiana. I'm sure there are nice spots in the state of Indiana, probably around the Indiana campus or Notre Dame. A lot of money in that area, I am certain. Every experience I have had with Indiana, the state of Indiana, it is just a shithole.
You'll never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
Every stop, every rest stop, every gas station, it's like you're fighting for your life in that state. The roads are crap. Everything's bad. You cannot get out of that state fast enough. By the way, I didn't make it to Marvin's. I was kind of sad about that. I know we talked about on the pod heading into the vacation break, there is that Marvin's, which I ate in Stevens Point when I was going to college 20 years ago. There was that spot Marvin's, and it was kind of a chain, like a small, really small chain. But they have the garlic cheeseburgers, the garlic hoagies. Remember we talked about that? They don't sit on top of each other. They sit next to each other, the patties, and they just go crazy with garlic salt. And I have very fond memories of it from my time in Point. And unfortunately, the last time I was in Point, which is, the last time I was in Point curling, but that's not really Point, that's Plover. That's another story for another day. But the last time I was in Point about a decade ago, I was sad to learn that Marvin's had gone out of business. They closed down for renovations. They never reopened. And this, I believe, we had our buddy Danny send me the email, is the only Marvin's that still exists. It's about, I think we calculated it's about an hour west of Indianapolis. So we just didn't have time. We had a Mammoth Cave tour on Saturday, I think at 10 a.m. or noon maybe. So we had to get down there in a pretty expeditious amount of time based on when we left Friday night. So I thought maybe we'd hit it on the way back. But once you're into hour 11 of a 16-hour drive, as much as I wanted to taste that double cheeseburger and the cheese fries and to relive those moments, and maybe they'd let me put a Super Troopers DVD in just to accept the ambiance of the whole thing, as much as I wanted to take that taste bud drive down memory lane, once you get to Indiana and you're 11 hours into a 15-hour whatever, 15-and-a-half-hour trip back, the thought of adding 2 hours and adding it in Indiana, which, as we just said, is a mess. I couldn't bring myself to do it. We kind of had to make a choice when we got to Louisville on Saturday night, this past Saturday. So we started making our way back from Congaree National Park on Friday. And then Friday night, we stopped with about 5 hours left in our trip in Louisville. And we stayed at a really nice hotel. We'll talk about that. And then also got to tour the Louisville Slugger Museum. So it kind of became a choice of, are we going to do that or are we going to go to Marvin's for this cheeseburger? And while I feel like at some point in my life I'll be back in Louisville, as I've said many times, the Kentucky Derby, and they were in the middle of Horse Week when we were out there. But the chances that I'll be back in Louisville, I think at some point in my life, are pretty good. You just never know. So I chose the Louisville Slugger, the night in Louisville, and the Louisville Slugger Museum tour above going to Marvin's. So I don't know if I'll ever be at Marvin's again. 21-year-old John, I'm sure, would be very upset about what 42-year-old John did and did not go to check out Marvin's. But luckily, a lot like 42-year-old John, 21-year-old John is all talk, so I don't think he would do anything about it, really. So I did not go to Marvin's, but we did travel through Indiana, and then it was about 4 hours to Mammoth Cave. So the chunks going out were not that bad. It was about 4.5 hours to south of Indianapolis. It was about 3 hours, I think, then to Mammoth Cave, 3-ish hours to the Smokies, 3-ish hours to Congaree. But the drive back was a long one. It was 945 miles, I think. We knocked out about 500 plus on Friday night, then stopped in Louisville, and then it was about 400 back home from Louisville. But it had been a long time since we did that. The entire country is under construction. Every interstate is under construction. Road rage is a real thing out there. You've got to be on the lookout for that if you're driving long distances. People get very annoyed very quickly on the road, including some in our own car. So we dealt with a little bit of that, but overall it was fine. You know, we do have the Sirius XM subscription, so we did get to listen to all the Brewer games. That was helpful, especially when you're doing a long drive like Friday afternoon, the Miz and Sale. 3 hours or 2.5 hours of our drive back was eaten up by listening to the Brewer game. Time goes a little bit quicker when you've got something like that to listen to. So that was helpful, but it had been probably 15-ish years since we had done a really long driving road trip like that where you eat up a lot of time on the road. So one other thing, in addition to Indiana, we did stop at our first Buc-ees rest station, gas station. It's not a gas station. It is Xanadu. It's really good. I have to admit, I'm a Quick Trip guy through and through, born and raised in Wisconsin, so Quick Trip till I die. I can't even tell you. I have so many visits on the Quick Trip app. I don't know if that's currency necessarily anywhere, but in Wisconsin it might be. It might be out there with the Scoopies and Kohl's Cash. I think trips, however many trips you have saved that you can spend on your Quick Trip app, that is currency. Quick Trip until the death of me. It is always going to be my number one gas station because of where I was born and raised. Now, Buc-ees, I'm sure you've read a lot about it or seen a lot about it. We stopped in Crossville, I think, Tennessee, and that was on the first night of our drive, maybe the second night. I kind of got lost in the wash there with the days we were on the road and how long we were gone. But it was on our way to Mammoth Cave. We stopped in Crossville, wherever that is, at my first ever Buc-ees. And I have to say, I wasn't skeptical going in. I wasn't going in with a bad attitude. I knew it had a lot of publicity, so, you kind of have a raised eyebrow when you hear a lot of how good something is before you actually go to it. They're pretty good, man. I have to say, visually, those are stunning because you've got like 128 areas where you can fill up gas. The size of the Buc-ees is almost like the size of a Walmart. I mean, it's that big. It's basically a retail box store, like a big box store. I had heard a lot about the barbecue at Buc-ees, and they actually have a carving station there where a bunch of people work, and it was pretty good. I had the 3-meat sandwich. They have a carving station and like a circle desk around the carving station with all the different assortments of sandwiches they have. Those were great. I heard the Buc-ees fresh beef jerky was extraordinary. It was really good, and my wife even liked it, and she does not like beef jerky. She hates when I get it on road trips. She hates the smell of it. She hates that I get it. Anytime we do a trip of any kind of length and we stop at a gas station for snacks, I always get like teriyaki jerky. She hates the smell of it. So she's not a jerky fan, but we got the teriyaki, the Korean barbecue, and she loved those. She actually liked the beef jerky, which is a rarity. And then I have to tip my cap. I don't know if this is a thing. I assume it is. And we had a texter on the morning show who drives a lot. When I was talking about this on the air this morning, a texter who drives a lot and said one of the reasons this texter stops at Buc-ees is because the bathrooms are immaculate. And they're massive. Like the amount of gas stations or gas pumps you have there. There is no world you would ever live in where you would have to wait at a gas station at Buc-ees. Because there are 100 toilets. There are 100. It's like if you went to the bathroom at Fiserv Forum or AmFam Field, except even bigger than that. So you're never going to have to wait. Like we did stop on our way back in Indiana at a Speedway that had one bathroom that was a unisex bathroom that needed a key. And when you got in there, it looked like it was an ongoing murder investigation when you went in there. These are immaculate. I don't know this, but I would assume that it is somebody's job at Buc-ees at every location. They're open 24 hours a day. I would think it is somebody's job to solely take care of the bathrooms and make sure they're clean. Now, next to every urinal, you have a hand sanitizer, its own individual hand sanitizer for every toilet and every urinal, and they actually have hand sanitizer. One of the jokes my wife and I always laugh at is anytime you go anywhere, remember, everybody installed the hand sanitizer stations during COVID, right? During the pandemic. Everywhere you went, they put in those Germ-X hand sanitized stations or whatever the brand was. And I always laugh because every time I go to one, there's never any hand sanitizer. I feel like they were just installed for optics and then nobody actually put any sanitizer in there. Because I'll check. Anytime I see one in the wild, I will check. And 9.999 times out of 10, there is never any hand sanitizer in it. These were all full. And I'm telling you, everything was sparkling. So we had that texter confirm on the text line this morning. They travel for work, and that texter said, if I'm near a Buc-ees, even if I have to go, even if I really have to go and the next Buc-ees is 30 miles away or 45 miles away, I will wait for that because there's no wait and you know they're going to be clean. So I have to tip my cap to that. And they have, of course, entire sections of their own branded apparel. They've got like Forever Lazies or Snuggies with the Buc-ees logo and hats and tumblers and pint glasses and Christmas ornaments and all kinds of stuff. So they've got a lot of that, but it was pretty impressive, I have to say. I had a little bit of a raised eyebrow just because of how all the good I had heard about Buc-ees. And pretty much 2 or 3 minutes into being in when I thought, oh, I get it. I understand the hype. And then especially when you walk into the bathroom and it's just these sparkling clean bathrooms, which you never encounter on a road trip, I had to tip my cap to that. So I think that's all of the road trip stuff. Driving, Blues Brothers, Buc-ees, Indiana, terrible. We can talk about hotels a little bit within the context of the actual stops. The South is interesting. It had also been a while since I'd been to the South. Now, we go on the spring training trip. I don't classify, even though it's in the South, I don't classify Arizona really as the South or Phoenix as the South. So we spent our time in Kentucky for Mammoth Cave and then in Louisville on the way back. In Tennessee, and the Smokies cover a lot of states, but we were in Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina for Congaree. things I like about the southern part of the U.S., which is there is a lot to like. I love gravy culture. I love that basically every hotel you stay at, anywhere you go, sausage gravy is readily available to be put on anything, on whatever you want it to be put on. You want it to be put on biscuits, you want it to be put on eggs, you want it to be put on your country fried steak, you want it to be put on your crock, whatever. You're going to eat your crock, you're going to eat your boot, we'll put some sausage gravy on it. I love that sausage gravy is readily available in every situation in the South. I also enjoy porch culture in the South, even though it was hotter than anything when we were down there. I mean, this was the gosh darn humidity.
Not so much the heat, it is the gosh darn humidity.
So hot down there. And I know we went there at a time of year in the mid to late August time of year where you expect everything in the South to be hot, but especially that time of year. I'm not going to be surprised by that. Area podcaster, Midwest podcaster surprised the South is warm in the middle of August. In mid to late August. Midwest podcaster shocked to find out the South is warm in the dead of summer. So I appreciate porch culture, though. Every place we passed, every stop we had, even the hotel we stayed at in South Carolina, just outside of Columbia in KC, South Carolina, which I'm not sure I would recommend, but whatever, we were fine. Even the hotel, which I think was a Baymont, was the last one we stayed at, they had a front porch on the hotel, and every night, we were there for 2 nights, we would come back, or even when we checked in, there were people just sitting and staring off into space on the porch, and some guys were playing cards, and some people were cycling through their phone. It is amazing, because if you go inside, everybody, every room has one of those industrial-strength air conditioners, and you know the ones I'm talking about, when you go into an older hotel, and they've got that huge unit right below the window that just runs, like that'll cool things until the end of the world, basically. You could go in there and be much more comfortable, but they just love being on the porch. The porch culture, and I can get behind that. The house I had in college, huge front porch. We loved sitting on that porch, playing cards, chopping it up, getting the Smoky Joe going. We loved it. So I do love porch culture, even though it's super hot out there, and you could be probably cooler sitting in front of a fan. I just love that every time you passed a house, people were sweating, but they were sitting on a porch. I like porch culture. I also like the prices in the South. Everything is cheaper in the South. Gas was like $3.10. We got to Chicago. It was $4.20, I think it was, on the way back. I don't know what it is or why that is, but everything is cheaper. We went to a couple of really nice restaurants at the end of our trip. And, you know, we each had a meal. We each had an appetizer. I had a couple of 2-tree cocktails. My wife had a cocktail. I mean, any other place, if we were getting this meal in Milwaukee or Chicago, $200, $250, maybe even $300 for the amount of food and drinks we had. Every time we went out to eat, it was like $110. And we got a lot of good food and had cocktails on top of it. I couldn't spend $200 on a meal down there if I wanted to, if I was trying to. So I love the prices. The South is a little odd, though. And I guess we were primarily in the South in Mammoth Cave and in KC or Columbia, South Carolina. I would not characterize Pigeon Forge as a real city of any attribute. It is a tourist city. So it's like the Wisconsin Dells. It's like if the Wisconsin Dells did a line of blow, that's what Pigeon Forge is. It's like the Wisconsin Dells on crack. It's like exponentially bigger and more stuff, but it's that same Wisconsin Dells kind of feel. And that's no knock against the Dells, but I wouldn't characterize Pigeon Forge or even Gatlinburg outside of the Smokies. I wouldn't characterize them as true southern cities. But the Cave City outside of Mammoth Cave, where we were for a couple of days, and then KC or Columbia, South Carolina, where we were for a couple of days, it is interesting the way those cities are constructed. Like, I had to Google, especially outside of Congaree, our last stop. When we were driving from the hotel to the national park, it was about a 15, 20-minute drive. So we drove through a rural part of KC, just outside of Columbia. And you pass these neighborhoods that don't seem to have any rhyme or reason to them. There are houses that have long been abandoned with, like, trees growing out of the windows and the front doors. Places that look like they haven't had an inhabitant in them for, like, 30 years. And then one block later, it's a really nice house. There are no garages. I don't think we saw a single one-car, two-car garage. Now, a big reason for garage culture in the Midwest or the East Coast is because of winter. You want to protect your car. You don't want to have to scrape off your car or have snow on top of it, brush that off in the morning. I think that's a big part of why we fall in love with garages. They don't have to deal with that, but it is interesting. Basically, every area in KC or Columbia, any rural area or suburban area, the cars would just park on the lawn. They would just park, and some of them would just park right in front of their steps. Like, you get out of the car, and then you walk up your front porch steps, sit on the porch for a while, of course, have some gravy on the porch, and then you'd walk into your house. Like, they would drive literally up to the steps of their house, get out, and walk in their house. And it was just odd to me that you had these areas where houses and factories had been abandoned. Then a block later, you had really nice places that looked kind of new. And also, there seems to be no zoning. Like, some houses are really close to the road. Some are further back. Some properties have acres and acres and acres, and they've got abandoned semi-truck trailers on them and sheds that have long been dismantled or half blown away. It just didn't seem like there was any rhyme or reason to the way neighborhoods are put together. So I did actually Google on that last leg, why does it seem like there is no rhyme or reason to neighborhood construction in the South? And ChatGPT used some fresh water from Lake Michigan and told me that a part of that is when you go back all the way back to like Civil War era, there was this emphasis, and still is an emphasis, on states' rights and individual rights in the South. And a part of that is no government kind of meddling. And there appears to be really not a lot of zoning restrictions. Like, you can buy property and you can put a shed out there. You can put 3 beat up cars out there. You can position your house at any angle you want to. It is sort of like the Wild West, where you can just kind of do whatever you want to do. So it was interesting to be in that part of the country for about a week, or a little bit better than a week. Now, let's talk about the national parks. So we knocked 3 off the list. Initially, this was going to be a trip just to the Smoky Mountains, but then when you look at it, Mammoth Cave is 2 hours away, Congaree is 2.5 hours away. When are we, and the Smokies are right in the middle, when are we ever going to go back to any of those? And we're trying to get to all of the parks. I don't think that that's going to happen. We found out while we were in Congaree that they just added another national park in West Virginia. So they just keep on adding. I think it's River Gorge. They just keep on adding national parks, and it's already a feat. Even when there were only like 55, it's already tough to get to all of them. So we're trying to get to as many as we can. But when you look at the map, it's, are we ever going to make a trip on its own to go to Mammoth Cave, or a trip on its own to go to Congaree in South Carolina? No. So just do it all while you're out there. So we started at Mammoth Cave, and I didn't have a lot of expectations for Mammoth Cave or Congaree. And I have to say, I think I enjoyed both of them a little bit better than the Smokies. So Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, they have some hiking, but obviously it is all predicated on these gigantic caves that have been formed over millions and millions of years. Here's what I really loved about Mammoth Cave, and I put this on my Facebook page the first day we were there. We scheduled 2 tours. We went on the historic tour of Mammoth Cave, and then we went on a lantern tour the next day. So they have lights, low lights. They don't want to interrupt the bat population or other things that kind of live in those caves. So they have some low lighting for the just general tours and the self-guided tours. And then they have these lantern tours where we had a group of 30, and they had 10 kerosene lanterns, and people had to volunteer, which of course took forever. And 10 people would carry those lanterns, and you would explore the caves only by lantern light, like sort of how they did back in the 1800s and long before that when people were exploring the caves for the first time. Here's what I loved about Mammoth Cave. As I said, it was very hot when we went there. And in that Kentucky area, in the Cave City area, it was probably mid to upper 90s, heat index value of 110, dew points in the mid 70s. So as you're walking down this trail from the visitor center to the main entrance of the caves, when you're about, I would say, 50 yards away from the entrance, you start to feel this cool blast of air at your ankles. And again, I have to emphasize, while we were there, it was so hot. So if you move, you're sweating. And Midwest people, we do not adapt well to that kind of heat and that humidity. We're never going to acclimate to that. So I'm basically sweating like I am right now. I am sweating as we're walking down thinking, God, this weather is miserable. And then out of nowhere, you get this Arctic blast of cool air that just kind of goes from the bottom of your body up. And as you get closer and closer to this cave entrance, it gets cooler and cooler and cooler. I had read, so I knew that it was going to be cooler in the caves. They actually recommended bringing a long sleeve with you for when you got into the caves. I brought one day 1. I did not put it on. I did not need it for day 2 because I found out that I'm a cave person. That's what I found out. I would like to live in a cave. Because you get down there and you walk in there, the caves are 54 to 55 degrees. And that's all they ever are. I mean, it is as consistent as time. They never get warmer or cooler than that. But when you're walking from 97 with a heat index of 110 and a dew point in the mid-70s, and you get into a kind of a soggy, I wouldn't say it was crisp like fall weather here, but when you get into then 55 degrees, it is so refreshing. And I am somebody that loves cool air. I am somebody that loves dark conditions. We never have any studio lights on it here. So as we're walking through this, my wife notices how happy I am. I say, I think I'm a cave person. I could live here. I could be a cave person. Put me next to the bats and the blind shrimp and whatever else all lived down here. There was all kinds of different species that had adapted to having no light and had adapted to having that kind of temperature. I could be that person. I could have stayed in that cave for the rest of that entire trip. It was so comfortable to me to be in that cave. Now, the caves are incredible, and there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of slavery history there, where some of the first tour guides were slaves in the early 19th century. But then there's also some War of 1812 history there, like the gunpowder. I forget what it's technically called in the cave. I think it was called saltpeter. So a lot of that can be found in the cave. So in the War of 1812, the rematch, Revolutionary War Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, a lot of the gunpowder, like 80% of the U.S. military's gunpowder came from Mammoth Cave, was harvested out of that cave. So there's some American history in there. Now, I will say this. If you go to Mammoth Cave, a lot of whether or not you have a good time checking out the caves has to do with what your tour guide is as a personality, how into it they are, how good they are at storytelling and the history of it. Our tour guide for day one on the history tour was not that great. Did his best. I mean, gave us some good information, but not a personality. The woman we had for day two was unbelievably good. And we had kids on that tour, on the Lantern Tour, and she was really good with getting them incorporated, making them feel comfortable, asking questions, which then led to adults asking a lot of questions. And she just had kind of a stage presence, almost like maybe she has a theater background in high school or whatever. She was excellent. Storytelling, getting people in the mix, asking questions, having answers to those questions, which I'm sure is not easy. Sometimes you never know what people are going to ask. So she thought well on her feet as well, obviously well-versed. So if you do that, if you go to Mammoth Cave National Park, and there's some hiking too. We did a couple of hikes. There's some hikes that happen above ground just to kind of give you that part of a national park trip too. So there are different trails you can take above the caves as well. I wouldn't say Mammoth Cave is known for their great trails or anything like that. You want to see the cave. But if you do that, nothing you can do. I mean, all you can do is sign up for the tour. But I think a lot of whether or not you have a good time with the cave tour has to do with how charismatic your cave tour guide is. And our day two, the Lantern Tour woman, I actually wrote a review. I almost never write a review. And I just said, I forget her name, Hillary. I made sure to point out she made this. I mean, it was fun either way to do it and to see the history and to be down there for 3 hours in those great conditions. But she really made that an enjoyable experience. So I would say that if you ever do Mammoth Cave, there's nothing you can do to say, hey, give me the good tour guide. I don't want this tour guide. I don't even know if they are a good tour guide. But that does make a difference. But the climate of the caves, especially coming from the heat we were in during that week, was just beautiful. So we spent 2 days there, did a little bit of hiking and did the 2 cave tours. Then we made our way to the Smokies. The Smokies are massive, and we spent 3 days there. I talked about this in the morning show. We had somebody text in and ask what we thought of it because they went there many years ago and were curious whether or not we had a good time, and we did. The one thing about the Smokies is it is such a massive park, and it is one of the most visited. I mean, we're talking Rocky Mountain National Park, Glacier, Yellowstone, one of the top visited, I think the most visited national park in the national park system. They have something like 13 million people that go there year to year. So you're going to get into there's a lot of people. If you're not a people person, especially strangers who are on vacation, who are not sure what they're doing or how they're driving or the pictures they're taking or whatever, if that agitates you, the Smoky Mountains may be a little agitating. You just have to know that going in. But it's such a massive park. We did 3 hikes. We did, I think, a 3-hour hike on day 1. We did about a 4.5-hour hike to a waterfall spot on day 2, and we did a shorter hike on day 3, and they were all super hot. I mean, we were just dripping sweat basically 20 minutes in, and then you're going for 4 hours or so. But we feel like we maybe saw 5% of the park. I mean, you do 3 hikes over 3 days, maybe at the most we saw 8, 9, 10% of the park. So it's one of those where if you really want to get into it, you almost have to spend 2 full weeks there to get into the deep trails and all the stuff you might want to do and the popular trails and the not popular trails. Now, we did find some trails that were sort of off the beaten path that were underrated, that didn't have a ton of people on them. But yeah, you go there and the views are beautiful and they're all like Bob Ross paintings and it almost doesn't look real. I mean, some of the national parks, we always say, it almost doesn't look real. Like when we were at Zion or Bryce Canyon or the Grand Canyon. It's so visually jarring the way it looks. It doesn't look like it's a real thing. It looks like it's CG. It looks like it's a backdrop, like a painting. And it's hard to wrap your mind around. So the views are stunning, but it is big. And it just feels like we ran into a ton of people, and there were a ton of drivers. And we tried to drive through a lot of it, too. On our way out, we did a little bit of a driving tour that took us through other parts of the park, and that was great. We saw parts of the Appalachian Trail. But it is just a lot of tourists and a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas of how they want to take in the national park. And it is so massive, you just feel like you didn't get all of it or even 25% of it. But we had a good time there. Took a lot of great pictures there. We did stay in Pigeon Forge. We stayed at the Drury. Now, I did text my buddies. I think we stayed at a Baymont in Mammoth Cave in Cave City. Cave City, by the way, is a tourist town that time forgot. It's not very big. It is the first city directly outside of Mammoth Cave. It looks like a city that last saw its update in 1988. You know, one of those where every hotel's just a little run down, just on the right side of crappy. You know, just it's fine enough. And the restaurants are a little run down, and there's not a guarantee of air conditioning anywhere. They have one little strip downtown where we did find a good distillery in Mammoth Cave. That was fun. They're on the Bourbon Trail. We found a really nice coffee shop. Shout out to Ace Coffee, I think it was called. They are pretty new in Cave City. They had an excellent assortment of sandwiches and donuts and coffees, and that was great. But it is sort of a place that looks like it got its last paint job, its last renovation in like 1978. Now, we stayed at a Drury in Pigeon Forge. As I just said, Pigeon Forge is basically Wisconsin Dells on crack. I mean, it has the upside-down house. It has different places where you can mini golf and go-karts and all that kind of stuff. And that's all it is. It is a very touristy city. And even Gatlinburg has that feel to it, too. But we stayed at a Drury, so that's the place we spent most of our time. If you have never stayed at a Drury hotel, my wife and I swear by these, if there is ever a Drury, D-R-U-R-Y, if there is ever a Drury hotel wherever you are going, go. Because they're not that much more expensive, or in some cases even cheaper than some of the Holiday Inns or the Baymonts or the Sleep Inns or wherever you stay. And the Druries, my wife and I learned many years ago, I forget when the first one we stayed. I think it was maybe in St. Louis 5 or 6 years ago. The Druries have what they call a kickback hour. So when you check in at a Drury hotel, they give you a card, and on the top of the card, it has the day you're checking out. And then under that, there's a list for every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and 3 check marks next to each day. So from 5 until 7 p.m., every single night at a Drury hotel, they have kickback hour, which is actually 2 hours. And what does that mean? That means you go down to the main area, and you can get 3 free drinks. Now, you paid to stay there, but 3 free drinks every night. And I'm talking drinks. I mean, whatever you want. Old-fashioned, gin and tonic. My wife got a tequila sunrise. I mean, they'll make you pretty much anything within reason. And you get 3 free drinks for those 2 hours. On top of that, they have basically a snack bar where the first night we were there, they had shredded pork sliders. They had a nacho bar. They had an entire cabinet full of steamed hot dogs and hot dog buns. So if you have kids, especially, we don't have kids, but you could not find a more kid-friendly menu than what they have there. And it's all free. Again, you're paying for the hotel room. I get that, but it's all kind of included. And they have an excellent breakfast in the morning. They had biscuits and gravy and breakfast potatoes and sausage patties and scrambled eggs and made-to-order scrambled eggs or made-to-order eggs. I think the last day they were there, they had like a Mediterranean spin on the eggs. So if you are somebody that is looking to get a little bit extra out of your hotel experience, I cannot recommend enough. It's the first thing we check for wherever we are going on vacation. And we were lucky enough to find one just outside of Pigeon Forge, a Drury hotel. But that's what it is. I mean, that's what the whole city is. Pawn shops and go-karts and mini golf and golf simulators and Top Golf. Dollywood's there. So that's what it is if you go to Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg, to me, we only spent a little bit of time in Gatlinburg. It's a bit more scaled down, but that's what you're getting into when you go to Pigeon Forge. So the Smokies were a lot of fun. It just kind of felt like when we left there, we thought like we barely even did it. So then we went on to Casey, South Carolina, or Columbia, South Carolina. We stayed about 15 minutes outside of Columbia. And we went to Congaree. I had no expectations for Congaree other than we just had to do it because we were out there. Like I said, we're never going to go to Congaree in and of itself just to make that one trip out there. So you may as well do the 3 all in a row and then circle back on our way home. So we got to Congaree. We spent 2 days there. I was very impressed. Now, Congaree will tell you, when you go to the visitor center, to go from the Smokies, the most visited national park, to Congaree, which is one of the least visited. Like they said, if 13 million people a year go to the Smokies, Congaree, I think, just saw their record this year, or are going to see their record this year. Their previous record was 380,000. So from 12 plus or 13 plus million to a little better than 350,000 people over the course of a year. And you notice that. We also went from 5,000 feet of elevation down to 110 feet of elevation. Now, what I read about Congaree before we went there, it is a park predicated on wetlands, swamplands, and the bald cypress tree, which are gigantic trees if they are allowed to grow, and if they're not knocked down by the lumber industry in the early 20th century. But they can get to be about the size of a small redwood. And I've been to Redwood Forest with my family way back in the 90s. If you've ever been to that national park, you know the size and scale of those redwood trees are just beyond comprehension. The bald cypress trees are kind of smaller than that, but if you get a bald cypress tree that's been around for 100 plus years, they can get to the size of sort of a small redwood tree. So that's what it is. It's wetlands, it's swampland, it's those big trees, it's right on the river. So they just put a bunch of cash into Congaree to redo what they call the boardwalk trail, because you don't really want to walk on a ton of the trails because you're going to sink into the mud. It kind of reminded me of that scene in The Princess Bride. I forget where Wesley was in The Princess Bride, where he's in the swamps and he has to wrestle that mutant warthog. Or like in Star Wars, where does Luke go? Where does Luke go in Star Wars? Swampland. And he gets the one-on-one training from Yoda. What was that place called? Dagobah? That's what it reminds you of. So we got there we left on, when did we get there? Wednesday night last week. So we got into Congaree. We got to our hotel at about 5 o'clock. And then we got to Congaree. I said, let's go check it out. We had a canoe tour scheduled for Thursday morning. And I said, let's just go and see what we can see. The visitor center is closed at that point, but let's just see. We had read about a boardwalk trail. It's about 2.5 miles. It's not a very big park. And that covers a lot of it. They just put a ton of cash into Congaree to rebuild the boardwalks that allow you to walk that trail without sinking into the mud. So we did it. We did the trail. It is at the same time eerie and peaceful. And peaceful, I mean, there's nobody there. We were there. You couldn't, if you just stood on that boardwalk, you couldn't hear a thing. A bird here or there, but that's about it. It was almost unsettling how quiet and peaceful it was. And then you kind of get the sun setting. You know what I mean? You kind of get the sun setting, and you got that swampy feel around. You kind of felt like you were in a Resident Evil video game. And I was looking for typewriters left and right. And it had that feel to it, but by about a half an hour or 45 minutes into the hour and 20 minute or whatever it was walk around that boardwalk, I kind of started to see the appeal of it. Like, it's just so quiet and you don't run into anybody or anything. It is very peaceful in a way once you get past that kind of scary, eerie feeling. So we did that the first night we were there, and then the next day we did a canoe trip down the river that kind of cuts through the Congaree River. And that was a good way. We saw a bunch of snakes. We saw a couple owls, a bunch of turtles. And then the tour guide we had for the canoe trip was a 3-hour kayak trip. We had about a 3-hour trip up and down the river, about 2 miles up and then back and out and back. And our tour guide for that was outstanding. I think it was Carolina Adventures we used, and I would recommend them if you're ever there. And they had a lot of good information, a lot of good Revolutionary War information. Again, a lot of slavery information for that time period in the U.S. where slaves would run away in South Carolina and hide and stay in those swampy areas where people were reluctant to go try to track them down. There's a lot of American history, both good and bad, in those forests, in that swampland area. I have to say, I enjoyed it. I really did. I had no expectations of Congaree going into it, other than I wanted to put the pin in the pin board when we got back. But it's a place, I don't know if I'd go back just to go there. They also have a Firefly Festival, so we were way too late into Firefly season. Firefly season is about mid-May till late June, or maybe the first week in July in that part of the country. And they have a very busy time for that month where people go and see the synchronized fireflies, which is almost like a fireworks show. So that's a big time of year for them. You know, if I were around that area or something were going on that brought me close to that area, I may go check that out. But it went from a place where I was just trying to check a box on a checkboard and just say we went there, we did it, put the pin in the pin board, put the sticker on, and we did it. We did Congaree. Get the magnet. We buy a magnet at every place we go to. Buy the magnet. We're good. I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for Congaree after we walked through there, saw the renovations, did the kayak trip. It was a pretty good time. And again, we stayed in Casey. We drove into Columbia the final night we were there. That's the University of South Carolina campus. Really good dinner down there, $104. We had fire-roasted pizza. We had 2 or 3 appetizers. I had 3 cocktails last night out. And it was, I think, $106. Incredible. Incredible value down there. So that's right on South Carolina's campus. And that's not too far from the national park and where we stayed for that trip. And then, yeah, we looped all the way back. 14 and a half hours all the way back. But I would say a fun trip. And if you are somebody that is trying to get to all the national parks, if you're trying to do all of them or make it to as many as you can, if you do that kind of a trip where maybe you'd fly to Kentucky and then you do those 3 all in a row, it's a pretty good trip. I would try to spend more time in the Smokies if I had to do it again, if I had unlimited vacation, which I know it seems like I do, but I don't. But if I had unlimited vacation, I think I would try to stay at least 2 or 3 more days in the Smokies and do a bunch more trails and try to see more of it. But overall, I mean, I was very impressed with Mammoth Cave. The temperature in the caves was outstanding. Congaree had its own kind of feel to it, and I ended up liking that place. So all 3 were a good time. And then, yeah, we looped back. We stopped in Louisville, as I said, on the way back. We did do the Louisville Slugger Museum tour, an excellent tour if you're ever there. That's right on the Bourbon Trail as well. And it's a nice, crisp 25-minute tour. You know, sometimes you get into the museums and the tours, and even though it's a lot of good information, like the World War II, when we were down in New Orleans a few years ago, excellent museum. And a place everybody should go if you're in that area, and it's important history to learn, obviously. That's all obvious. But 2 buildings and 7 stories each building, and maybe even 3 buildings. It's so much. And it's so much reading and so much information and so much slow walking and trying to dodge being in people's pictures. I appreciated about the Louisville Slugger Museum. It was a 25-minute tour. We got to see the inner workings. We got the history. There were like 6 video stops. They had 2 other rooms with Babe Ruth bats and Mickey Mantle. I love you, Mickey. Mickey Mantle bats and Roger Maris bats that you could kind of look at and do that kind of thing. But it was quick. I mean, you spend an hour there and you got the perfect amount of information. You got the perfect 25-minute tour. They give you a mini little bat when you walk out of there. I thought it was excellent. People have told me it's a great stop. I concur. I echo those sentiments. That is a great stop if you're in that area. You also got to do, in the Louisville Slugger Museum, they have a spot where it's all encased in glass. And you can stand behind, like if you were in a batter's box, you can stand behind the glass in that batter's box, and you hit a button. And then a pitching machine on the other end of it, like if you go to a batting cage, it will say, all right, here's what a Cole Hamels, I think was the pitcher we had, here's what a Cole Hamels 96-mile-an-hour fastball looks like. And they have Cole Hamels, a video of Cole Hamels in his stretch and in his delivery. And then there's a little hole, and that's where it shoots the ball out. And I'm telling you, I don't know, how do you hit a baseball? 96, you don't see it? 96 miles an hour, and you stand on the other side of the glass, and it kind of just comes in. You blink, and it's gone. How do you have time to react, to determine what pitch is coming in, and to make a swing decision? I have no idea, but I am a podcaster after all. And then Jacob Mizorowski, I don't think they've made him into the video form yet, but that was a 95, 96-mile-an-hour fastball. Imagine 7 or 8 miles per hour more than that. So they had cool little things like that at the Louisville Slugger Museum as well. And downtown Louisville seemed like a good time to me. We didn't have time to hang out there. There were a ton of bourbon tours on that Saturday morning that were already underway at like 10 a.m. It seems like it'd be a fun spot to go to for a 3 or 4 day weekend. Do the bourbon tours, Bullet Bourbon, Maker's Mark. I mean, they're all there. Woodford, they're all down there. They all have their tours. They're walking tours. Go to the Louisville Slugger Museum. They've got great barbecue down there. Obviously, horse racing culture in that area, too. So that's a place I wouldn't mind going back to and doing a 3 or 4 day stay. We did stay at the Brown Hotel in Louisville. If you ever have a chance to stay there, please do it. That is like their Pfister. Unfortunately, we were not haunted. I didn't have was it Ray in Ghostbusters in that cut scene where there's a woman making a move on him in the middle of that Ghostbusters scene? I didn't have that happen. But it's an early 1920s hotel. And they've renovated it, but it kind of stayed true to the old version of it. They've got a 4-star restaurant in there that is the home of the Hot Brown. If you've never had the Hot Brown, Google that. It was invented at the restaurant in that hotel in 1925, I think, or 1926. It's a piece of sourdough bread with roasted turkey, covered in cheese and white gravy and broiled with bacon and tomatoes on the top. But it was invented there. It was invented there in the early 1920s. That's their signature. So we had that. Really good cocktails. So yeah, Louisville seems to me like a good time, a place I'd like to go back. And then we drove all the way back on Saturday after the Slugger Museum tour. We made our way back then Saturday afternoon, got back home around 5 or 6 o'clock. And it was a breath of fresh air to get back to low to mid 70s after the upper 90s we were dealing with for the entire week. So that's the trip review. We had a great time. Another kind of once-in-a-lifetime, put the pins in the pin board, and 3 more national parks off the list. All right, so what did I say, half an hour? That was my claim, right? If you fast forward half an hour, if you're just hitting the 15-second forward button, you had to hit that plenty of times to get to the part of the podcast where we're actually going to talk a little bit of sports. So let's go through it. We will start with the Brewers. We're not going to go all the way back. Since I've been gone, when was the last podcast we had? It must have been Friday the 14th, so that was right at the beginning of the Dodgers series. So we listened to all the games, and they take 3 out of 4 in L.A. They win the season series with the Dodgers, so that was great. And then Seattle at AmFam Field, they scored 22 runs last week. On Tuesday, looked like a Packers-Seahawks final score, 22-0. They won that game. They win that series. And then over the weekend, you got the Atlanta matchup. Now, Atlanta is the 3rd best team in the NL right now. As of right now, the Brewers are the number 1 team in the National League at 81-50. 81-50. Let me say again, 81. They were 81-49 going into last night. I had to text a couple of college buddies of mine. In 2005, when this team finally finished at 500, where they finally didn't have a losing season. So I kind of started watching baseball 91, 92, and they had a couple of good years there. And then as I got more into it, they got worse and worse and worse. So from 93 all the way through 2005, not only did they never make the playoffs, they never had a winning year. So I was texting my buddies because we were all in college at that time. The year they finished 81-81, that was 2005. That finally broke the string of years where they didn't have a losing season. We damn near threw a parade. I mean, honestly, we got a quarter barrel. We were grilling out. Now, again, in that era of my life at 21 years old, you didn't have to threaten me with a good time. I was ready for a quarter barrel and a grill out at any moment of any part of any day. But we did, specifically to celebrate that, we all kind of got together and had some beers and did some grilling, and we were excited, genuinely excited for an 81-81 finish. I texted them and said, remember when we were so excited for an 81-81 finish, and this team right now is 81-49. Like, they're going to hit the over. I'll knock on wood. I'm not worried about it. Remember the over-under? We talked about that at the beginning of the year. The over-under, I had to go back and look. The over-under was set at 84.5, which, as we said at the beginning of the year, is actually higher than it's ever been. They have hit the over every year since 2016, with the exception of the pandemic year of 2020 when they missed it by a game. And it feels like every year they get the projection of 79 wins, 80 wins, 81 wins. They're always kind of hovering around 500, and then they go out there and win 90-plus games every year. It's the easiest bet I make every single season. And this year they did. I mean, they elevated it. 84.5 is a number that we have not seen, I don't think, since maybe 2011 when they were going into that year where they picked up Greinke and they were sort of a World Series favorite or a front runner in the NL. It had not been that high in almost 15 years. And we put a good amount of money on it. And there is a chance. Now, we'll see how this series goes. They have the day off today. They're in New York on Tuesday. They're home with the Rangers Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then those big series with the Cubs 1 week from today, it is the first of 4 at Wrigley Field, then a break, and then 3 more against the Cubs at AmFam over Labor Day weekend. But there is a chance that by the time we record 1 week from today, at the end of August, they could have hit the over on 84.5. That is insane. That they would hit the over on 84.5 before we even got to Labor Day weekend. It is as frustrating as October has been, and as frustrating as the playoffs have been. It is remarkable what this franchise has been able to do year in, year out with the consistency of regular season success. 81, even with the loss last night, 81-50. So on Friday, it was the Miz-Sale matchup. And Miz didn't have his best stuff, but 6 innings of shutout baseball, right? Or did he give up a run? God bless this mouse. We've got a battery situation in here. This mouse is locking up on me. I don't think he gave up a run. And that was pretty much as advertised. That was one we listened to on the drive. That must have been to Louisville that night. Yeah, Miz, 6 innings, no runs, only 6 strikeouts. And as they talked about on the radio broadcast, he was hitting 100, 101, but not the 102, 103, 104. And even Miz said after the game that he just didn't feel like he had his best stuff, didn't feel like he had his best energy. But even without his best stuff, 6 shutout innings and 6 strikeouts. And they did kind of walk the tightrope, had a thin bullpen. Antonio Sensatella had to give them 2 innings on Friday, gave up a run, had the bases loaded right in that 8th inning, but got out of it. And then McGill again was tremendous, 1, 2, 3, or he gave up 1 hit, but struck out 1, a 10-pitch save on Friday. And they hang on to win 2-1. Now, Chris Sale, I still think you're looking at Miz is the far and away front runner to win the Cy Young in the NL. Like, he's minus 400. And then you have, I think Sanchez is still number 2, but Sanchez and Sale are kind of sitting as 2 and 3, and you can sort of interchange them. So you had 2 Cy Young frontrunners dueling there on Friday, and the Brewers came out victorious 2-1. Chris Sale, after the game, said that the Miz fastball is the best fastball he has ever seen in his career. Chris Sale has been pitching in professional baseball since 2010. And in the minor leagues before that, you're talking about a guy that's been around baseball for almost 20 years. And he has Cy Youngs. I think Cy Youngs plural, right? I think he's won 2 Cy Youngs, maybe 1. How many has Chris Sale won? Got to get off the Dagobah page here. Chris Sale Wiki. He's at least won 1. I mean, we're talking about one of the best pitchers, one of the best lefties in the last 20 years. He is a 10-time All-Star, not 1-time Cy Young, 10-time All-Star, Cy Young Award winner, Triple Crown, pitching Triple Crown in 2024, so 2 years ago. So this is the guy that is saying that the Mizorowski fastball is the best fastball he has ever seen. In the words of Nicolas Cage, that's high praise. So the Brewers win that one 2-1. Miz now 13-5 on the year, a 1.68 ERA, and 216 strikeouts. So he has the best ERA in baseball, the most strikeouts in baseball, the lowest whip in baseball, and now that 13-5 record, I don't think he's going to be able to get that pitching Triple Crown just because, Sanchez has 16 wins, Sonny Gray now has 16 wins, Foster Griffin, who has 15 wins, so there are a lot of guys ahead of him, and as we've talked about, the Brewers are trying to keep him fresh for September and October in the playoffs, so if they can give him an extra day, if they can stay on the 6-man rotation, I just don't think there's enough starts there to get him to the win total, to get him to first place in that stat category. But he was really good again, and on a day where he did not have his best stuff, he throws 6 shutout innings against the 3rd best team in baseball. And the Brewers take that game 2-1 on Friday. We also got the news on Friday. Brandon Woodruff. What a curveball this was. Or was that Saturday? Maybe it was Saturday. We got the news either Friday or Saturday as they were opening the series or getting set for Game 2 of the series. Brandon Woodruff, in an attempt to exhaust all options before he has another major shoulder surgery, and we hadn't heard a Woodruff update in forever. The last Woodruff update we heard was that he was on his way for another major shoulder surgery. This year was done. Probably next year was done. And remember, he said when he announced the injury, he said, look, this isn't a funeral, okay? I've made a lot of money. I've had a lot of success. I'm going to do my best to come back just like I did last time. So let's not act like this is a funeral. Let's not talk about my career like it's a postmortem, okay? Let's not go crazy here. And that was sort of the last we heard. But coming out of that interview with Woody, it felt like this year's done, probably next year's done, and then maybe we see you again in 2028. Now, if there's not baseball next year, maybe he misses nothing, but it felt likely that if we see Woody again on a major league mound or at spring training, it would be in 2028. So we had not heard an update since then. Apparently, he was waiting to see if there would be any kind of healing that would happen on its own. So trying to exhaust every option before you go onto the night for a major shoulder surgery, for a second major shoulder surgery. And as it turns out, and we got the update over the weekend, after 4 weeks of not doing anything, there was, quote, significant healing in that shoulder to the point where the team specialist that was looking after that shoulder said, we don't need to do surgery. So Brandon Woodruff is going to start a throwing program this Wednesday afternoon. Now, what does that mean realistically? I still don't think we're going to see him this year, but we have maybe entered the Lloyd Christmas, so you're telling me there's a chance maybe he would be an available arm once you get to playoff time, because they said he's going to start a throwing program on Wednesday, and they said that program is a 5-week program. Now, keep in mind, we've got a guy with a huge injury history. He has not thrown a ball in 4+ weeks. He is going to start a throwing program on Wednesday. So if that throwing program is 5 weeks, so that takes us into September, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would mean his throwing program will wrap up on Wednesday, September 30th, and that will be heading into the first weekend, I believe, of playoff baseball. So even if all of that goes well, and even if his shoulder responds well, you're still talking about a guy who's got to get ready to throw not only in a major league game, but in a playoff game. I don't think it's very likely, but we did go from no chance to maybe a shred of a chance that he could come back. But I also now think for Woody, I mean, just outside of this year, if that shoulder stays true and he gets through this throwing program in these 5 weeks and he's feeling okay, there's a chance maybe he does have a chance at pitching in 2027 if there's baseball in 2027, and we're not looking to 2028 like we thought we would. So I don't know if this means anything so much as it relates to this year, but for him, it may mean he can pitch in a year, or he could be with the Brewers, I would assume, or somebody else at spring training when we get to February of 2026. That was good news and optimistic news. Now, we'll see how the throwing program goes. I don't know. Are you going to throw Brandon Woodruff out there in an NLCS game? You know what I mean? I did text some other buddies of mine that if he were available, he would be the kind of guy who, if you were down 8-1 in an NLCS Game 3, maybe he goes out there and eats up a couple of innings. You know what I mean? So you don't have to use a big name out there. Maybe he keeps you in the game. But I don't know. I still think there's a very close to 0% chance we see him at all this year, but there was no chance before we got that injury update over the weekend. So then you get into Saturday, and who was on the hill on Saturday? Again, the travel thing, my brain is just mashed potatoes. Coming back from vacation. Logan Henderson. What a start from Logan Henderson. How good has this guy been? He's always been good, but especially in the aftermath of the trade deadline where he does not get traded for Tarek Skubal, and he stays in Milwaukee, he has been unbelievable. He has been every bit as good as Tarek Skubal has been in L.A., and Tarek Skubal has not been great in L.A. Logan Henderson shoved 6 innings of 1-run ball on Saturday, and then Jake Bauers put together one of the at-bats of the year. Rake Bauers, as he is known on this podcast. What a performance he had in that game on Saturday. A 12-pitch at-bat that ends with a go-ahead 2-run bomb. His 23rd of the year. This guy is putting together an unbelievable year. His OPS is still hovering around 890. He's got 23 home runs, 75 driven in. He's hitting 270. He's playing okay defense, but that's never been his calling card. He seems to now be a clubhouse leader on this team as well. This is probably a conversation for a different day. We'll broach it now, but this will be something we talk about in the offseason. Jake Bauers, his contract is up. I mean, he's on a year-to-year. And for a player with his resume up until this year, a guy that hits for some power, he takes his walks, he hits 200, I wouldn't say up until this year Jake Bauers is somebody that had a huge market. You know what I mean? If he didn't land in Milwaukee, maybe he signs a minor league deal somewhere else. Does he make that major league team at some point? Injuries, whatever. He ends up in the best spot that he could be in entering the year. But what do you do now with a 30-year-old first baseman who seems to be kind of finding it late in his career and who is giving you power and he's giving you average and he's taking his walks and he's got one of the top 25 or 30 OPSs in Major League Baseball? What do you do with a guy like that? You know what I mean? He's 30 years old. What kind of contract is he going to garner? Is somebody going to throw $15, $20 million a year at him at the end of this year for a 3 or 4 year deal? Would that be the Brewers? I would think that's unlikely, but you kind of want him to stay now if this is what he's going to be. Or is this sort of a one-off? You see that a lot in baseball where randomly somebody will have a great year, you sign them to a big deal, then they come back next year and they're half of what they were the year prior, and you're kind of thinking, oh, crap. It was just a one-year wonder, and now we're paying this guy $10, $15, $20 million a year, and he's back to hitting .205 with 15 home runs a year. It's an interesting question for the offseason because I've never really seen this. I've never seen a 30-year-old career .202 hitter have the kind of year that he's having this late in his career. What do you do with that? But that was one of the at-bats of the year. He said it was the best at-bat of his career, and Pat Murphy said it was one of the best at-bats he's ever seen. We're talking about a guy like Chris Sale with 40, 50 years of baseball experience, a 12-pitch at-bat that ends in a go-ahead 2-run bomb. Brewers take that game 4-1. Aaron Ashby got the save. DL Hall, ever since I said DL Hall is not a good lefty, not a good leverage lefty, he's been outstanding. He had a scoreless inning on Saturday, so you get the 4-1 win on Saturday. Now, you're going for the sweep last night. And not only are you going for the sweep, you are going for the season series win. The Brewers lost 2 out of 3 in Atlanta earlier this year, and they won the first 2 games of this series. So going into last night, you are 3-2 against a team that you might potentially need some kind of tiebreaker with when you get to postseason play. Now, the Brewers have, I think, a 4 or 5 game lead on Atlanta, even coming out of last night. But you never know. We got a long way to go. We got a month and a week to go here, so you never know when you might need that tiebreaker. Last night was the Little League Classic in Williamsport. It is a now near-decade tradition where they do one Major League game a year at that small park in Williamsport, not at a Little League park. Could you imagine? What would the over-under be on runs if you let the Major League players play at the actual Little League stadium with aluminum bats? They may not record an out. You may never even get out of the first inning. So it's the Major League-ish park that's adjacent to some of those parks. And again, they've been doing this for about a decade where they do one game. And now the Little League World Series really ramps up this week. They're down to 16 teams. And in the next week or so, that will be decided, the Little League World Series champion. So they've been doing this now. Major League Baseball has been doing this for about a decade. I think they started in 2016. And this year, the Brewers and Braves got the designation to play this game. Now, can I be a little bit of a whiner for a second? Can I be a little bit of a baby? Can I be a little bit of an old man yells at cloud here? I understand how cool this is. That one game out of the year, you dedicate the Major League game with the Little League game. And I think the crowd, it was 2,500 people last night. Essentially, it's all the players that are still in town that are still playing and their family members. And it's like maybe a handful of other tickets that you have to have. You have to know somebody. I don't think you can just go and buy tickets for this game. If you're going and you're not on a Little League team or family adjacent to a Little League team that's still there, I don't even know how you get tickets to get in. So I understand how cool it is for the big league players to interact with the Little League players, and it's just a dream come true. If you're an 11, 12-year-old boy and you're playing in the Little League World Series and then you're meeting a bunch of Major League players on Sunday night and getting their autograph, I mean, that's a great moment. And that's just pure Americana. So I understand why Major League Baseball does this. I think it's great for the game. I think it's really cool for the kids. Jacob Mizorowski, when he walked out to the Fan Fest on Sunday, it was like the Beatles walking onto Ed Sullivan's set. It was like David Hasselhoff in Germany in the early to mid-1980s. That's the kind of reaction he garnered. I mean, the kids were screaming when they saw Miz, and he was signing autographs, so I get all of that. It's a feel-good thing all the way around. Now, that said, if I were to be a little bit of a whiner about this game last night, I would simply say, number one, that's a home game for the Brewers. The Brewers, the best team in baseball, with the best home record in baseball, they end up losing a home game because of the Little League Classic. So you lost a home game. And I don't know how Major League Baseball makes that right. I know Mark Hodnazzi will make sure it's made right. I don't know how they give money to the Brewers for what they're going to miss out on in terms of ticket sales and $18 beers and $12 hot dogs and all that stuff. I assume Major League Baseball makes that right for the Brewers' bottom line. But you've got two teams here. The Brewers have the best record in baseball. The Braves have the third best record in the NL and the fourth best record in baseball. And you've got a season series tiebreaker on the line. This is kind of an important game, and you're sort of playing it like it's an exhibition game. You're playing in front of 2,500 people. You're taking the Brewers out of their home stadium. ABS review was not usable last night, and believe me, late in the game, the Brewers could have used it on some of those calls. They did have replay review, but not ABS review. So you're kind of playing a weird outlier exhibition game late in the year, in late August, and yeah, that may have an impact. Let's say the Brewers go cold and the Braves get hot, and all of a sudden it comes down to a tiebreaker for the number 2 seed, and having a bye into the DS as opposed to playing in the wild card round, that game may determine that. So now the season series is split at 3 after you lose last night, and it comes down to division record. Now we'll see how that breaks down too, but you know what I mean? If you're playing that game at AmFam, I'm not saying it's a guarantee the Brewers win that game, but you feel like you have a better chance playing in front of a sold-out crowd Sunday afternoon at American Family Field in the friendly confines as opposed to traveling to New York, which is where they're going next. That starts on Tuesday, the 3-game set with New York. So they flew to New York on Sunday. They drive to Williamsport. Then they drove back to New York Sunday night. Now they have a day off today. But, you know, if I were to pick nits here, if I were to complain, if I were to whine about a really feel-good moment for little leaguers and for major leaguers and for the sport of baseball and Americana, if I were to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, I would simply say the Brewers lost a home game, and you lose a game where it may have an impact on who has home field. It may have an impact on who has a bye and who's playing in the wild card round late in the year. Let's hope it doesn't. But that's sort of what was on the line. It would make more sense to me, and there's no way you can schedule this out because they make the schedule before. I mean, obviously, the schedule is made before the year, but they select the game. Like they already announced last night that the Blue Jays and the Cubs are going to play the game next year. So who knows? I mean, the Cubs and Blue Jays may be relevant. They may be irrelevant. It would be nice if you could take 2 teams that don't have a lot on the line and then have them play at Williamsport, because then you still get the major leaguers. Even if they're on a bad team, it's still awesome if you're an 11 or 12-year-old kid. You get to interact with a Major League Baseball player. I don't think you care if they're the best team in baseball, the 3rd worst team in baseball. That's still a really cool interaction, and every team has good players, even if they're not very good teams. It would be nice if they could select a couple of teams that don't have as much at stake for a game like that, because it did sort of play like an exhibition game last night, and the field conditions weren't the best. That played into some poor infield defense as well for the Brewers, guys slipping on the grass. So they had their chances. They had just a night where they could not get a hit with a runner in scoring position. 2 for 12 in those situations, 11 men left on base. Had the bases loaded, 1 out in the 2nd inning, couldn't get a run home. 2 on, nobody out. 6th inning, couldn't get a run home. Then in the 9th inning, I thought William Contreras had hit a go-ahead 3-run bomb. You had 2 on, nobody out, and Contreras hits one to deep right center field. And off the bat, the way it sounded off the bat and the way he reacted to it, the way he was kind of strutting to first base, I thought, oh my God, he just hit a go-ahead 3-run home run. And it just dies on the warning track. Now, again, that would have been a home run in American Family Field. That would have been out of the park. It would have been in that little right field area that I want outlawed, that one that juts out. But it would have been out in American Family Field. So that's another one where you look at and say, boy, if he hits that ball in American Family Field, you're up 5-4. Instead, you lose 4-2. So they had their chances. They didn't get it done. Braves pitching was good enough, and the Braves take the finale on Sunday by a final score of 4-2. But yeah, the season series now splits 3 apiece. And if the Braves and Brewers end up tied for whatever, the 1 seed, the 2 seed, the 3 seed, if they end up tied, it will come down to whose division record is better to break that tie, because now they are 3-3 in the season series, and they won't play each other again. So the Brewers come out last night with an 81-50 record. They have a 6-game lead on the Cubs. It was 7 going into last night. And Cubs had a couple of heartbreaking losses in Seattle Friday, Saturday. You hate to see it, but they pound the Mariners 19-2 on Sunday. So right now, the Brewers have a 6-game lead and the tiebreaker on the Cubs. They have a 1-game lead on the Dodgers, who have won 6 in a row. And now we know the Brewers have the tiebreaker there. And they have a, 5-game lead? Yeah, 5-game lead on the Braves. So the Brewers in first place, Dodgers a game back second place, Braves are 5 back in third place, Cubs are 6 back in fourth place in respect to the entire National League. Now the Brewers had the day off today. They begin that 3-game set against the Mets on Tuesday. At least they got a day off with the night game on Sunday. So it'll be Kyle Harrison on the hill, 6:10 Tuesday, Dustin May, 6:10 Wednesday, Thursday, 6:10, Robert Gasser goes, then Mizorowski back on the hill on Friday. You've got the Rangers battling for that last AL wildcard spot, which it feels like every team in the American League is in the running for that last wildcard spot. Like literally the Kansas City Royals, who are 16 games under 500 but have won 8 in a row. they're like only 6 games back of that final wild card spot. They're not necessarily dead yet. So you've got the Rangers at AmFam Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then, 1 week from today, the first of 2 showdowns with the Cubs, first of 4 at Wrigley Field, then a break, and then the Cubs come to AmFam starting on Labor Day Monday. Just right now, the way it lines up, and it feels like Pat Murphy's really he's manipulating the pitching rotations a bit. Right now, it looks like Dustin May will go Monday in Chicago, Gasser Tuesday, and it'll be Miz on the hill at Wrigley on Wednesday, next week Wednesday. But day off today in New York, taking on the Mets on Tuesday. I think that's all the Brewers stuff. Oh, last night, too, was Carl Ravage's final broadcast on ESPN. They had all those layoffs at ESPN. I feel like, now Carl Ravage, he refused to say anything mean. I wouldn't expect him to. He refused to disparage ESPN in any way. He spent 33 years there calling games. Baseball tonight, when I was a kid in the 90s, when I was in college in the early 2000s, right when I was out of college in the late aughts, in 07, 08, 09, Baseball Tonight was one of my favorite shows on ESPN, and Ravitch was the host of that show. So ESPN just went through this huge layoff. I think in the early part of August, they laid off like half of their company. And Carl Ravitch was a part of that. Now, they have allowed him, and he has agreed to, since being laid off, to call a couple of games yet. Last night was his last night on the air. I thought this was really cool. They interviewed Garrett Mitchell in the middle of the first inning, and here's what Garrett Mitchell had to say at the end of that inning as he was trotting off the field.
Thank you. Hey, Carl, I wanted to say one thing to you real quick. I appreciate all that you've done. I know this is your last broadcast. I appreciate everything that you've done for this game. I've been listening to you for a long time, and it's a pleasure to share this last one with you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to share it with you, too. I appreciate it.
Have a good one, guys.
I do want
That's really cool, and they did that all night.
to say before we get out of here,
Chris
Carl,
Sale.
I got to say congratulations and thank you. Congratulations on playing some more golf, and thank you for the 30 years, man. You were a staple in my living room for 30 years watching ESPN. You made it fun to watch ESPN, so I just want to say thank you for everything you did, man. It was awesome. You're one of the good ones. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Carl Ravitch is one of the best. One of the best in-studio hosts they've had, a really good play-by-play guy on top of that, and you saw that last night. But that was a Staples show. ESPN has changed so much since I was a kid in, the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s where you had Baseball Tonight and PTI. It's become more of a hot take channel now where First Take is on for 3 hours. And that's, they don't do those kind of shows anymore. Baseball Tonight is rarely on. Baseball Tonight was on every single night. And he wasn't always the host of every episode, but that was something that just was on all the time. They don't do shows like that anymore. There aren't a ton of shows that are just dedicated to breaking down the game or giving you highlights. Everybody's got to have a hot take on everything. That's where I guess the money is. I guess that's where the clicks are and the ratings are, I suppose. But that used to be a staple show, and that was Carl Ravitch's last broadcast last night. I thought that was a fun moment with Garrett Mitchell and Chris Sale last night, thanking him for his time and the contributions he made to baseball and the broadcast world. He was great. That was his last broadcast last night. Now, let's talk quickly about the Packers and Broncos, and then I want to get out of here on just a little bit of Giannis news, which we talked about in the teaser, which is kind of making me laugh a little bit at how annoyed Heat fans are getting with Giannis already. So the Packers in Denver, preseason game number 2 on Friday. They looked really good. 33-13 win. It's the preseason, so, what do you take from it? There was Jordan Love out there with the number ones for the opening drive, and it was a nice drive. A 12-play, 63-yard drive. Love was 5 of 7. He had 4 different receivers, 56 yards, a touchdown, obviously no turnovers, quarterback rating of 134.5, and he found Marshawn Lloyd on an 11-yard touchdown reception. So for the second straight game, Marshawn Lloyd got a lot of reps on Friday, and he did not get hurt. So this is the most extended period. I know we're kind of being tongue-in-cheek about it. This is the most extensive period of Marshawn Lloyd's now entering year 3 career where we've seen him play. And he does have that explosive speed. We've seen that, but it's just good to see him get those reps and not get hurt, and he gets in the end zone. So one drive for Love, and then he made it sound like they've got practice today, they've got joint practice with the Cardinals on Wednesday, then the Cardinals play the Packers Friday night, the only Lambeau Field game for the preseason. But Love made it sound like, and so did Matt LaFleur, that was it. That is it really for the number ones. That'll be it for Jordan Love. And it was a successful preseason. He had a good drive that ended in a field goal in preseason game number 1, touchdown drive in preseason game number 2. they looked about as crisp as you would expect the number one offense to look in the preseason and coming out of 2 or 3 weeks of camp. Now, the other story on Friday is Trey Smack. I know we talked about heading into preseason game number 1. Remember, we did that whole rant. What the hell does rant mean? We did that whole rant about why are we doing this? They feel like they're a division title contending team. They feel like they're going to have home playoff games. They feel like they can make a run to a Super Bowl. So why are we playing the rookie kicker game with a team that you feel like is competitive? Remember I said in 2023, when you didn't know what this team was going to be, you just traded Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love was going to be his first year as a starter. A lot of young pieces around him. Would it be good? Would it be bad? Would it grow as the year went on? Nobody knew. So that team, it made perfect sense. You draft Anders Carlson, you throw him out there, and see how things look, because you're not expecting to be in the divisional round and a chance to win in San Francisco and get to the NFC Championship game, which is where they ended up, but you were not banking on that. So it made sense to go the rookie kicker heading into a year like that. If you think you're going to be a competitive team, which I believe Goody thinks that and LaFleur thinks that, I think that. I think a lot of fans do. If you think you're going to win 10, 11, 12 games and maybe win a division and have home playoff games and be in an NFC title game with a chance to go to the Super Bowl, why are we doing this with the ups and downs of a rookie kicker? And up until preseason game number 1, we had seen a lot of ups and downs with Trey Smack in camp. But based on what we saw in preseason game number 1 against Pittsburgh and based on what we saw on Friday, this kid looks good. I mean, the training camp numbers were not good, but he was a perfect 3 of 3 in Pittsburgh and hit a 58-yarder. He was a perfect 7 of 7 on Friday, 4 for 4 on field goals, 3 for 3 on extra points. He hit a 59-yarder. Now, Denver, you get a little bit of that element where you've got the thin air, so kickers are always going to be able to kick a little bit further in those conditions in Denver. But he is dead nuts. And now none of these are scrapers either. It's not like he's just inside the upright or he's just crossing over the crossbar. He is pounding these things, and they are middle. Like, you know, there's a difference between, so what is he then? Combined, he's 10 of 10 in the 2 preseason games between extra points and field goals. He's a perfect 10 of 10. Sometimes you can see a 10 of 10 and he's barely getting inside the upright, or maybe he had a ricochet or just got over the crossbar and you're kind of thinking, yeah, he's 10 of 10, but I wouldn't say any of those felt comfortable. He is 10 of 10 and every single one of them is dead nuts down the middle and has an extra 4, 5, 6, 7 yards behind it. He has been amazing. Now, can you carry that over? Can you do it again? Like we talked about coming out of preseason game number 1, this isn't like baseball, where you can be 10 of 10 in your first 2 games, and then you go 1 of 5 in game 3, but people say, oh, yeah, but they were 10 of 10, so of course you're going to have a bad game. He's got to be that good, maybe not that good, but he's got to be close to that good every time out. Preseason game, regular season, playoff game, whatever. So he has to stay consistent, but man, have the early returns been impressive on Trey Smack. Given what we were worried about going into the preseason games, he has, I think, tamped down any concerns so far. Now, we'll see how he looks on Friday, and there's no backup kicker, so nobody's getting any other reps. So the one thing is, you're not going to see a lot of number 1s on Friday, but if they get in field goal position, that is going to be Trey Smack. That is going to be that unit, and that's going to be the unit they go into the regular season with. He has to keep hitting those kicks, but man, does he look good. He looks so good in the first 2 preseason games. The other thing coming out of Friday, the kick return game. Is Cam Accord the guy? Is he the guy that's finally going to resuscitate special teams? We had multiple kick returns on Friday. Pierre Strong had a 68-yard kick return. Sky Moore had a 30-yard kick return. Sky Moore had a 16-yard punt return. Even Will Shepard had a 5-yard punt return. Remember we talked about coming out of the Pittsburgh game. This special teams unit has been so bad that I wasn't even aware you could get forward progress on a kick return or a punt return. Like, that's how long it's been since the Packers have had a threat to return. Now, Keyshawn Nixon had his little run there 3 or 4 years ago, and he had the kick return against Minnesota. But it has been a long time since we have seen consistent forward motion out of a kick return or a punt return, especially a punt return. And those 2 units look really good right now. So maybe Cam Accord is the guy. Maybe he's the one. The first guy since, what was the dude's name we talked about in the last podcast? The special teams coach in the mid-90s, Nolan Cromwell. Remembered it. Nolan Cromwell. Desert Storm General Nolan Cromwell. Maybe he's the guy. I mean, maybe he is the special teams coordinator that can kind of bring this unit back to life, because the kicking looks good. The kicking operation looks good. The returns, both kick and punt returns, look good. We haven't seen a ton of laundry on coverage units, so far so good for that unit as the Packers get a 33-13 win on Friday. Now, they've got Matt's brother Mike LaFleur, the new head coach in Arizona. I don't believe they have joint practice today, but they have joint practice on Wednesday. So they practice today, day off Tuesday, joint practice with the Cardinals on Wednesday. And then they play the Cardinals at Lambeau Friday night. That is the fabled Bishop's Charities game. I don't think they'll be giving away Pope hats the way the Chicago White Sox gave those away, or Bishop hats. But that is the Bishop's Charities game Friday night at Lambeau Field with the Cardinals, a 7 o'clock kickoff. And then you get a couple of weeks off, and then we're talking season opener in Minnesota on Sunday, September 13th. But I think a lot to like, especially from the special teams unit and the opening offense in Denver on Friday. And then lastly, I just want to wrap up with this. I was just kind of catching little snippets of this on Twitter on Saturday and then especially on Sunday. So I know we've talked about, and we actually have the emailer. I forget his name. I have to go back and look. We had that emailer on the mailbag episode that was tongue-in-cheek, I think, speculating that Giannis didn't really want to leave Milwaukee, but he recognized that the only way for the Bucs to get draft picks, for them to get good young talent, is for them to trade him. And remember that emailer? He said, I wonder if Giannis is going to go to Miami for 1 year, and he's not going to sign the extension, and then the Heat have to give up all these good young assets and these draft picks. Now, all of a sudden, the Bucs have a lot of good young players. All of a sudden, the Bucs have a lot of draft picks, something they did not have up until about a year ago or a month or two ago. All of a sudden, the Bucs have kind of reloaded with young talent and draft picks. And now, wouldn't it be something if Giannis then doesn't sign the contract extension in Miami and comes right back to Milwaukee in 2027? And I laughed at it and said, God, I love it. I love the thought process there. I don't think it'll happen, but it would be a fun thing to have happen. Well, Giannis keeps on talking about how much he wants to come back to Milwaukee at the end of his career. Now, I forget what episode it was, but we talked about how he discussed that with Jim Paschke in the interview they published as he was on his way out. And then on another podcast, I forget what one it was, he brought it up again. He brought it up another time over the weekend on another Miami Heat podcast. And it was making me laugh because all of these Miami Heat podcasters, bloggers, Twitter personalities, all of them on Sunday were kind of getting fed up with it. Like, he's brought up going back to Milwaukee 3 or 4 times now, and he hasn't even played a game in Miami. He just got to Miami a month ago. And you saw a lot of those Heat accounts on Twitter yesterday saying, hey, buddy, could you shut up about going back to Milwaukee? You just got to Miami. Can we please focus on Miami and getting a title here before we talk about going back to Milwaukee? And it just kind of made me laugh. And he does. He has brought this up now multiple times on different podcasts and outlets about how at the end of his career, wink, he wants to come back to Milwaukee. And he always kind of says, if Milwaukee will have me. Well, of course we'll have him. But he always sort of qualifies it with that. Well, if Milwaukee, at the end of my career, whenever I'm done in Miami, whenever that is, next year, whenever I'm done in Miami, if Milwaukee wants to have me back, I'd love to go back there because my heart is there. I became a man there. My father is buried there. My sons were born there. My daughter was born there. It just did make me laugh that he has brought that up so many times that it is getting to a point already with Heat fans where they're kind of agitated. And I would be too. If I was a Miami Heat fan, I would be over the moon that we're getting a player of this caliber. I don't know that Giannis, with the roster around him, now they did sign Klay Thompson, but Klay Thompson is way past his prime and injury-riddled. But they did sign him over the weekend, so they add him now into Bam Adebayo and Andrew Wiggins. I don't know. I still don't think that right now is a top 4 team in a loaded Eastern Conference. I think it's a playoff team. I think they're likely to be in that 5, 6, 7 spot next year. And again, as we talked about, this could be year 1 of a 3 or 4 year process to really get that franchise the way they want it around Giannis. He may not be there, though. After a year or 2, he might not be there. It's like that Magic Johnson gif. I'm not going to be there. So it may take a little bit. I still think that's a playoff team. I don't think they're a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. But if I were a Heat fan, as they're trying to assemble this new era of the franchise that is centered around Giannis, I would be a little, why does he keep talking about Milwaukee? Can you just focus on Miami for a little bit? We haven't even gotten to training camp yet. So I always think back to that email that we got in the mailbag episode of that speculation of, could this all have been a boondoggle? Could this have been a whole thing where Giannis knew the only way for the Bucs to get assets that they desperately needed and to get some salary relief that they desperately need, the only way to get all of that is for him to be traded, and then they get that. What if he just comes back a year later? That would be incredible. Well, anytime I see him talk about that, I kind of think about that email. Well, that was making me laugh a little bit on Sunday that the Heat fans are already seemingly pretty frustrated that he just keeps on bringing up wanting to go back to the Bucs. All right, that'll do it for us here. Long podcast, but an expected long podcast. We will get back after it on Friday. We will recap the Brewer-Mets series. We'll be getting set for Packers-Cardinals on Friday night. And we will have our first bold prediction that is unlikely to occur as it relates to Packer regular season football. We will have that on Friday as well. Have a happy, safe work week. We'll chat with you then.